Hi everybody. I had a definite spiritual impulse today around the Justice Arcanum. So I thought we'd had enough of my musings for now, that I'd revert back to the core teaching of Mubus. So I'm going to, with no further ado, read out his 8th Arcanum, Justice, and straight from the book. Justice is realised. I've given 3 quotations, as I do at the start of each Arcanum. From Levi: "The science of life is written in the book of nature, but man alone can read it." From Paul Christian: "We're given the idea of themis, equilibrium." The 8th Arcanum expresses in the divine world absolute justice. And from Ouspensky: "You wished to see truth, and now you behold it. But remember what happens to the mortal who beholds a goddess." Now to Mubus. The Hebrew letter corresponding to Arcanum 8 is Cheth, whose numerical value is 8. The astrological correspondence is the zodiacal sign of Cancer. The hieroglyph from this arcanum is a field symbolising all which can be subjected to cultivation, and it is the passive region to which the activity of the victor of Arcanum 7, the Chariot, should be directed. The card of Arcanum 8 has at the bottom 2 columns. Between them, further on, a seated feminine figure, Themis. The forehead of the figure is girded with a ribbon of gold. The eyes are blindfolded. On her chest, attached to a chain, there is a solar cross. In her left hand, Themis holds a scale. In her right hand, a sword. It is assumed that the figure is sitting on a cubic stone, although the folds of her garment cover and conceal it. We will attempt to try to interpret the picture. The figure is female. The Arcanum therefore represents something already existing, already materialised. On the card we see the binary 3 times, always balanced by a 3rd element. The first from the columns, such as those of Arcanum 2, neutralised by Themis herself, sitting in the middle. The interpretation of this binary is somewhat different from that of Arcanum 2, the High Priestess. It would succinctly be the following. Seeing Joachim, and there being Themis in the middle, we can deduce that on the other side is Boaz. In other words, if we perceive what is symbolically called by us one of the 2 forces that compose the pair and recognise the existence of an astral vortex, or tourbillon, whose system includes the force that we see, then we must also recognise the existence of a second force that complements the first pair, and therefore is equal to it, parallel to it, but directed in the opposite direction. If we are aware that we have an imagination depicting images in the present for us, and at the same time imagine some clichés as past ones, then we should know about the possibility of presenting other clichés in the future. If we believe in the higher androgynous manifestation of the divine, and see in any emanations its characteristic feature of activity, expansiveness, that which knows, then we must be convinced of the existence of other emanations of a passive, attractive nature that coincide with the field of what to know can. If there is justice, perceived as negative in the binary system, and there is the possibility of spiritual harmony, which is neutral, then probably there is mercy, which is positive. If there is an idea of assent, positive or active, and if the idea of level, neutral, is allowed, then there must be an idea of a dissent, passive or negative. These formulas explain the title of Arcanum 8 in the plane of the archetype, Liberatio, that is, the law of the equilibrium of the great metaphysical scale, in which one of the dishes is charged with the positive value of the great arcanum, and the other, which is negative, with its negative value. The pointer symbolises the androgynous apex of the ascending triangle. The sword in the hand of Themis explains to us the arcanum in the human field of the theosophical ternary. The sword reminds us that there is the law of Themis, even when conditioned by the times, places, and environments, and that the transgression of this lex, the passive and negative, will bring a punishment, which is positive, due to the action of the equilibrium principle, which is neutral. The word lex is a name given to conditional rules, which are evolutionary within time and space, but inevitable at every given moment. Thus, lex, which I think is law, will be the second title of the arcanum. On the other hand, Themis holds a balance, another binary, with its neutralizing element, the pointer. Let us bring this symbol to the field of nature. If someone breaks the balance of balance, it will necessarily provoke a reaction aimed at restoring equilibrium. If someone put a 5 kilogram weight on the left plate, you should, in order to balance the scale, load the right plate with another 5 kilos. If someone sustained his karma by a process inconsistent with the laws of equilibrium, in the individual accounts within the chain of their incarnations, then she or he will have to erase this spot and restore balance when they repeatedly stumble upon the page which has been stained. The third name of the arcanum will therefore be karma. The card itself is called Themis, or justice. Let us turn to the evaluation of arithmetic deconstructions of the arcanum, starting with the 2-digit deconstructions. 8 equals 1 plus 7. The 1, or the first arcanum, which is the magician, represents the conscious manifestations and the application of the balanced androgynous principles. The 7th arcanum, the chariot, is that of victory. Therefore, 1 plus 7 means the application of victory. In fact, the first duty, the first concern of the victor, should consist in establishing the order, justice, and legality on the ground that is conquered. Justice is the wife of victory. The Arcanum 8 is the wife of Arcanum 7, just as you might say Netzach and Hod are inextricably intertwined. But where does the magician apply the fruit of mental victory? Naturally on the astral plane, during the astral performance. Here we must remember the law of Liberatio, taking into account the opposing mood influences. We have decided, for example, to suggest to a patient a certain action. With this, the momentum given is mental. However, if we ourselves ardently desire that the patient performs what is suggested, that is, if we are astrally interested in this, we create a hindrance to the formation of the second indispensable force to provoke a whirlwind, which should serve as an instrument for the suggestion. In addition to this second force, other volitional flows may join, complicating and forcing us to reinforce our suggestion. For all this to be avoided, counterbalance our desire with an absence of desire equivalent in strength. This is indispensable to convince us that the realization of the suggestion is indifferent to us, whilst at the same time remaining mentally convinced that it should take place. So in fact the suggestion will be made in an impressive way, and in general we'll better achieve what our personal animistic interests do not interfere with. It is the reason for which we get more easily to something other than ourselves. The same rules apply to punishment. In order for someone to punish fairly and promptly, they must be imbued with mercy. In general, An ignorant and weak being throws himself into the fight when emotionally involved, thus diminishing their chances of winning. A strong being is controlled, knows how to wait and choose the fight in the most favourable moment. Since we speak of justice, it is natural to know to what extent and in what way an occultist can allow himself to punish his fellow man. The astral cliché of punishment is formed automatically and according to the Arcanum 8, therefore can only be the mental evaluation of the offence of his fellow man. This forms the axis of a whirlwind, a tourbillon. The rest will fit the astral. However, we should not forget that the law of karma, the negative pole of Fabre-D'Olivet's triangle, was established once for all and will act even without any participation on our part. Therefore, an enlightened occultist knows that he has a right to a mental censorship of the actions of his fellow man only to the extent that he himself participates in the work of the emanations of the primordial principle. In other words, only a theurgist has the right to censor, and even so, only to the exact extent where he really is a theurgist. Theurgy, even of temporary nature, requires a very clear world-view and a great internal purity. Therefore it is rare that participation in a punishment is in accordance with the law. Magical punishments allowed by Christian Illuminism for their adherents are collectively called Reprobatio, literally condemnation. There are 3 degrees of reprobations: disapproval, sorrow for the act of one's neighbour, and censure.